1st, and it's Monday, October the 13th, 2025, and here are your top news stories for today. All 20 remaining living hostages held in Gaza have been released and returned to Israel under a U.S.-brokered ceasefire, marking a pivotal moment after 2 years of war. Under the same agreement, Hamas is set to return the bodies of 28 deceased hostages still in Gaza. In exchange, Israel has begun freeing 250 Palestinian prisoners, serving long or life sentences, along with more than 1,700 detainees from Gaza, who had been held without charge since the October 7, 2023 Hamas-led attacks. U.S. President Donald Trump, addressing Israel's parliament on Monday, hailed the hostage release as evidence of a, quote, region transformed, calling it, quote, the beginning of a new Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Trump as, quote, the greatest friend Israel has ever had. Trump's hour-long speech, which frequently departed from his prepared remarks, included an unexpected call for Israel's President Isaac Herzog to issue a pardon for Benjamin Netanyahu amid his ongoing legal troubles, CNN has reported. The U.S. president closed his address with a vision of regional unity, declaring, quote, new bonds of friendship, cooperation, and commerce will join Tel Aviv to Dubai, Haifa to Beirut, Jerusalem to Damascus. The United States has been secretly supporting Ukraine's long-range strikes on Russian energy infrastructure to weaken Vladimir Putin's economy and pressure him into negotiations. American intelligence has helped Kyiv target key refineries and energy facilities deep inside of Russia, causing disruptions that raised domestic fuel prices and forced export cuts. This cooperation intensified after a July phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which Trump reportedly signaled support for more aggressive strikes to, quote, make Russia feel the pain. Washington's intelligence has guided Ukraine in planning routes and timing for drone attacks, greatly improving their effectiveness, the Financial Times has reported. The strikes have significantly damaged Russia's refining capacity, up to 20%, while Moscow has been forced to import fuel from allies such as Belarus and China. A mass shooting early Sunday at Willie's Bar and Grill on St. Helena Island in South Carolina, home to the nation's largest Gula community, left 4 people dead and at least 20 injured. The attack occurred during a crowded high school alumni event, sending patrons fleeing in panic as gunfire erupted outside the bar. 4 victims remain in critical condition, and authorities have not yet released any names. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Office described the incident as, quote, tragic and difficult, asking for patience as the investigation continues, the Associated Press has reported. The White House announced on Friday that it had begun mass layoffs of federal employees amid the ongoing government shutdown, an unexpected move aimed at pressuring Democrats to end the funding standoff. Officials said the, quote, reductions in force would affect thousands of workers across major departments, including health and human services, energy, and homeland security. President Trump said the layoffs would be, quote, Democrat-oriented, framing them as both a political and fiscal maneuver to shrink the government. Democrats and federal worker unions condemned the action as illegal and retaliatory, filing court motions to block the firings, the Wall Street Journal has reported. The layoffs deepen the crisis as hundreds of thousands of workers remain furloughed or unpaid, and Congress remains gridlocked over competing funding and health care proposals. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton is expected to face federal charges soon over alleged mishandling of classified materials, this according to 2 federal officials. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland is reportedly preparing the indictment, following FBI searches of Bolton's home and Washington, D.C. office back in August as part of a national security investigation. The searches were prompted by CIA intelligence and focused on possible violations of the Espionage Act related to the possession and sharing of defense information. Bolton's attorney, Abi Lowe, denied wrongdoing, saying all materials were legally reviewed and cleared years earlier for Bolton's memoir, NBC News has reported. The case revives long-standing tensions between Bolton and President Trump, who has publicly called for Bolton's prosecution. Protests against the Trump administration's immigration policies erupted on Saturday outside of an ICE facility in Chicago, where clashes between demonstrators and police led to multiple arrests. Hundreds of protesters breached the perimeter of the Broadview facility as officers wielded batons to restore order. In Portland, Oregon, activists staged a, quote, laser party, encouraging participants to shine lights at helicopters, a move that police warned was dangerous and illegal. The unrest came as a federal court ruled that National Guard troops deployed to Illinois by President Trump must remain under federal control but cannot yet be used for patrols or property protection, the Daily Mail has reported. The decision followed legal challenges from Illinois officials who argued the deployment was unconstitutional, underscoring rising national tensions over immigration enforcement and federal authority. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, now running for the U.S. Senate, announced plans for undercover operations targeting liberals. Paxton framed the effort as a response to what he called, quote, leftist political terrorism, following the killing of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk. His statement included claims linking transgenderism and Antifa to nationwide violence. Paxton said his office would, quote, identify, investigate, and infiltrate alleged leftist groups, the Daily Mail has reported. Democrats denounced the investigations as politically motivated. Thousands gathered in Tel Aviv on Saturday night to celebrate the anticipated release of hostages held by Hamas, chanting, quote, thank you, Trump, and then booing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The rally featured speeches by former U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, joined by Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, who helped broker the U.S. coordinated peace deal to end the Gaza conflict. Under the agreement, Hamas is expected to release the remaining 48 hostages in exchange for Israel freeing around 1,950 Palestinian detainees and prisoners. Many in the crowd blamed Netanyahu for prolonging the war and delaying the hostage deal, accusing him of putting his political survival ahead of their release, the Telegraph has reported. Witkoff and Kushner praised Israel's resilience and military, while Ivanka Trump called the deal a, quote, triumph of faith, courage, and shared humanity. French President Emmanuel Macron has appointed a new government led by reinstalled Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, following days of intense negotiations to break France's political deadlock ahead of a looming budget deadline. Lecornu described his lineup as a, quote, mission-based government, focused on delivering a 2026 budget plan before the year's end, as France faces EU pressure to reduce its deficit. However, Macron's allies in the Conservative Republicans Party declined to formally join the coalition, pledging only case-by-case support, Al Jazeera has reported. The reappointment underscores Macron's struggle to govern amid a hung parliament, mounting debt, and public anger over pension reforms that continue to threaten the government's stability. Afghanistan said on Sunday that its forces killed 58 Pakistani soldiers and captured 25 army posts in overnight border clashes, claiming the attacks were retaliation for repeated violations of Afghan territory and airspace. The Taliban spokesman said Afghan forces now had, quote, complete control of the border, though Pakistan has not confirmed any casualties. The fighting followed Afghan accusations that Pakistan bombed Kabul and an eastern market earlier in the week, charges that Islamabad has not acknowledged. Pakistan, in turn, accused Kabul of harboring militants from Pakistan and said its army had, quote, destroyed several Afghan posts in response, the ABC News has reported. The escalation, which closed key border crossings, prompted Saudi Arabia to urge restraint and dialogue to prevent further regional destabilization. A powerful explosion at the Accurate Energetic Systems plant in rural Tennessee killed 16 people and left no survivors, authorities have said. The blast, which was felt for miles, reduced the military explosives facility to twisted metal and ash as investigators searched the wreckage for clues to the cause. Sheriff Chris Davis described the scene as heartbreaking, calling for prayers for the victims' families, while local churches held vigils for the tight-knit community. Officials have deployed a rapid DNA team to help identify the remains, and warned that unstable explosive material has made recovery efforts dangerous and slow, NPR has reported. Federal investigators from the ATF are assisting, but it could take weeks or months to determine whether foul play was involved. Okay, it's 10 past the hour, and here's a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service. And now here is the National Weather Forecast for today. A coastal low moving along the mid-Atlantic on Monday will bring moderate rain, strong winds, and potential coastal flooding before moving offshore by Tuesday. Persistent onshore winds and high tides may cause beach erosion, rip currents, and localized flooding along the east coast. Meanwhile, a separate system over the northwest will shift southward, bringing coastal rain and heavy mountain snow to the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, and northern Rockies through Tuesday. The southwest and central Rockies face a slight risk of excessive rainfall on Monday, with localized flash flooding possible in vulnerable areas. By Tuesday, Southern California will also see heavy rain and flooding risks as moisture from an upper-level low moves inland. At least 27 people were killed in Gaza City during violent clashes between Hamas security forces and armed members of the Dugmosh family, one of the deadliest internal confrontations since major Israeli operations ended. Fighting erupted in a neighborhood near the former Jordanian hospital where Dugmosh gunmen had taken refuge, prompting panic as dozens of families fled. Hamas said the Dugmosh fighters had killed 2 of its members and wounded 5, leading to a heavy security operation. The family claimed Hamas sought to evict them to establish a new base. The toll includes 8 Hamas fighters and around 19 Dugmosh members, with both sides blaming each other for starting the violence, the BBC has reported. Hamas has deployed thousands of security personnel to reassert control over areas recently vacated by Israeli troops, though the group denied sending, quote, fighters into the streets. Madagascar's president warned of an attempt to seize power illegally after an elite military unit known as CAPSAT sided with protesters and announced it was taking control of the army. The intervention follows weeks of youth-led demonstrations over water and electricity shortages, corruption, and calls for the president's resignation. CAPSAT, which helped bring the president to power in a 2009 coup, said it would not fire on protesters and urged the rest of the military to join them. The general was installed as the army chief and stated that the military's role is to restore calm without commenting directly on the president's fate, The Guardian has reported. The protest, led by a leaderless Gen Z movement, have already resulted in dozens of deaths, highlighting deep social and political unrest in one of the world's poorest nations. Severe floods hit northeastern Catalonia, Spain on Sunday, trapping people in vehicles and homes after torrential rains drenched the region following similar downpours that caused chaos in Ibiza. Videos showed torrents of brown water sweeping through streets and submerging cars, while local streams and ravines overflowed, especially in towns like Santa Barbara and Godall. The National Weather Agency issued a red alert for the region, warning of up to 180 millimeters of rain in 12 hours. Officials described the situation as chaotic, with debris and vehicles swept throughout the towns, though thankfully no injuries or missing persons were yet reported, France 24 has reported. Emergency services warned residents to remain cautious as the floods continued to impact local communities. Heavy rains in Mexico have killed at least 44 people due to flooding and landslides, with Veracruz, Hidalgo, and Puebla among the hardest-hit areas. President Claudia Sheinbaum met with governors to coordinate an emergency response as rescue teams dig through mud-filled villages. Hundreds of military and emergency personnel are conducting rescues and setting up shelters for stranded residents. Thousands remain without electricity and running water, and some communities in Veracruz are reached only by air to deliver food and medical aid, the Associated Press has reported. The rains, which were linked to tropical storms Priscilla and Raymond, dumped up to 21 inches of rain in parts of Veracruz, causing rivers to overflow and inundate neighborhoods. Cameroon held a presidential election on Sunday that could extend 92-year-old Paul Biya's 43-year rule by another 7 years, potentially making him 99 years old by the end of the term. Biya, in power since 1982, faces 9 opposition candidates, amid concerns about his age, health, and the country's challenges. Opposition figures and voters have raised fears over voter fraud and an unwidely electoral process, though many, especially younger citizens, are hoping for change. The election comes as Cameroon faces security crises, including a separatist war and Boko Haram attacks in the north, with nearly half the population living in poverty, CNN has reported. Results are expected by October the 26th, with the winner determined in a single round of voting. The trial of 2 British men accused of spying for China collapsed after the United Kingdom's government refused to label Beijing a national security threat at the time of the alleged offenses. Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry were both charged under the Official Secrets Act for sharing information between 2021 and 2023, but prosecutors could not secure testimony confirming China as a, quote, enemy. The case was then dropped weeks before trial, prompting accusations of political interference, which the government denied, citing that China had not been officially designated a threat during the conservative government in office at the time. Critics argue the decision undermines national security, while supporters highlight ongoing diplomatic engagement with China, PBS has reported. British intelligence agencies continue to warn that China, along with Russia and Iran, represents a major espionage threat to the United Kingdom. Chinese Coast Guard ships used water cannons and rammed a Philippine government vessel off Thitu Island in the disputed South China Sea, causing minor damage but no injuries, the Philippine Coast Guard has said. 2 other Philippine fishery vessels were also targeted, with the Chinese side claiming the ships had entered Chinese waters near Sandy Cay without permission. The Philippines condemned the aggressive maneuvers, asserting they will not surrender any territory, while the United States expressed support for Manila and criticized China's actions. China maintains its claim over nearly the entire South China Sea, despite a 2016 arbitration ruling invalidating its claims, the Associated Press has reported. Thitu Island, part of the Spartleys, hosts Philippine forces and a fishing community, while China has built 7 artificial islands nearby, some with runways and missile systems. A drone and artillery attack by Sudan's Rapid Support Forces on a displacement camp in El Fasher killed at least 60 people, including children, women, and the elderly. The assault struck the Dar el-Aqam Center on university grounds multiple times, one of the deadliest since the RSF began besieging the city 18 months ago. El Fasher, the last major city in North Darfur under the army's control, has become a, quote, open-air morgue, with nearly 400,000 civilians trapped amid starvation, disease, and attacks on hospitals and shelters. The United Nations and rights officials condemned the attacks as violations of international law and called for protection of medical facilities and humanitarian access, the DW has reported. If El Fasher falls, the RSF would gain full control of Darfur, leaving Sudan's army confined to the north, the center, and the east. Ian Watkins, the former Lost Prophets singer and convicted pedophile, was killed in a prison attack in the United Kingdom on Saturday. He was serving a 29-year sentence at HMP Wakefield for child sex offenses, including the attempted rape of a baby. West Yorkshire police said prison staff reported the assault at 9:39 a.m. local time and that Watkins was pronounced dead at the scene. Homicide detectives are investigating the incident, which involved a knife-wielding inmate, TMZ has reported. Watkins, who was 48 years old, had previously been attacked in prison in August of 2023, but survived without life-threatening injuries. A Zimbabwean opposition MP died after the vehicle he was traveling in struck an elephant on a highway. The accident, which occurred early Friday, also injured 4 other MPs. The MP was a member of the Citizens Coalition for Change and a poet celebrated for his contributions to the arts, and he died instantly from his injuries. Colleagues described the crash as horrific, noting that the elephant struck the vehicle after the initial impact, the BBC has reported. Tributes have poured in, praising the MP as a dedicated lawmaker, educator, and arts advocate, while the other injured MPs are also receiving treatment in a local area hospital. Today is October the 13th, 2025, and on this day in history, in the year 1775, the United States Continental Congress authorized the first American naval force, laying the groundwork for what would become the United States Navy. In the year 1943, Italy formally declared war on its former ally Germany and switched sides during World War II. And in the year 2010, 33 miners in Chile were rescued after being trapped underground for 69 days following a mine collapse. October the 13th is also National Breast Cancer Awareness Day. Alright, it's 20 past the hour, and we're going to do a quick market update. The S&P 500 is up 1.63%. The Nasdaq is up 2.10%. Gold is up 2.35%. Oil is up 1.19%. Bitcoin is down 0.25%. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 1.30%. And now we'll go to a few business news, and I'll meet you on the other side. Bitcoin plunged from $121,000 to $109,000 per coin in about 7 hours Friday, triggering nearly $20 billion in liquidations across the crypto market, mostly from long positions. Ethereum fell to $3,686 per coin, and Solana to just above $173, while stocks also tumbled, with the Nasdaq down 3.6%. The S&P 500 2.7%, and the Dow Jones 1.9%. The sell-off followed President Trump's cancellation of a planned meeting with China's Xi Jinping and his announcement of a major tariff increase, heightening U.S.-China tensions. By the weekend, markets began to recover, with Bitcoin rising 5% and Ethereum up 10.5%, as analysts attributed the moves to short covering and a geopolitical overreaction rather than structural market issues, Decrypt has reported. Major altcoins including Solana, BNB, and Dogecoin also surged between 11% and 16.5% during the relief rally. President Trump announced on Truth Social that the U.S. will impose a 100% tariff on Chinese goods starting on November the 1st in response to China's, quote, extraordinarily aggressive new export controls affecting multiple countries. He warned the timeline could be moved up depending on China's reaction, and said export controls targeting China's access to, quote, critical software would take effect the same day. Trump also cited China's recent restrictions on rare earth mineral exports, new port fees on U.S. ships, and antitrust probe of Qualcomm, and halted U.S. soybean purchases as signs of hostility. The announcement followed his earlier threat to cancel a planned meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Yahoo Finance has reported. U.S. stocks fell after the tariff warning, while existing tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese goods remain on hold until November the 10th amid ongoing trade negotiations. Brent and U.S. crude oil prices fell over $2 per barrel, or more than 3% on Friday, as President Trump's threat of increased tariffs on China raised concerns about global demand. Analysts cited a combination of factors including OPEC production increases, higher output in the Americas, easing geopolitical tensions after the Gaza ceasefire, and Trump's tariff threats as driving the sell-off. The Gaza ceasefire, ratified by Hamas and Israel, shifted market focus back to a looming oil surplus as OPEC unwinds production cuts, despite a smaller than expected November output hike, Reuters has reported. Additional concerns include a potential U.S. government shutdown, which could weaken domestic demand in the world's largest oil-consuming country. Hey, real quick, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all of our news stories. And now here's the top national news stories for today. Over 30 people were rescued in Alaska after Typhoon Halong's remnants caused flooding and high winds, leaving at least 3 still missing. The storm damaged at least 8 homes in the region, with rescue operations conducted by the Alaska Air and Army National Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, and state troopers. Meanwhile, a powerful nor'easter swept through the U.S. East Coast, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and coastal flooding from the Carolinas to New England. New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts faced flooding alerts, damaging winds, and airport disruptions, with hundreds of flights delayed or canceled, NBC News reported. Authorities warned residents to avoid floodwaters as up to 8 inches of rain and high winds threatened infrastructure, beaches, and vulnerable coastal areas. A helicopter crashed into palm trees near Huntington Beach, California, after spiraling out of control above the beach. 5 people, including 2 on board the helicopter, were all hospitalized after being rescued from the wreckage, while 3 pedestrians on the street were also injured. Videos show the aircraft plunging toward the edge of the beach, wedging between trees and a staircase near the Pacific Coast Highway. The cause of the crash has not yet been released, The Guardian has reported. The helicopter was linked to the annual Cars and Copters fundraising event scheduled for Sunday. 2 more people have died from injuries sustained in a mass shooting in Leland, Mississippi, raising the death toll to 6. The shooting occurred Friday night in downtown Leland following a high school homecoming football gathering, leaving at least 10 others injured. The newly deceased victims were identified as 18-year-old Amos Brantley Jr. and 35-year-old Jamichael Jones, joining 4 others who died at the scene. Authorities, including the FBI and ATF, are investigating and searching for suspects, urging the public to provide any information, ABC News reports. Leland, a small city of about 3,600 residents, continues to mourn the tragedy, with officials describing it as an unprecedented act of violence within the community. A plane crashed near Hicks Airfield in Tarrant County, Texas on Sunday, killing 2 people after colliding with an 18-wheeler and multiple trailers before bursting into flames. Surveillance footage shows the aircraft crashing nose first, sliding along the pavement, and becoming vertical as it ignited, sending thick smoke visible for miles. Authorities have contained the fire, but the victims have not been identified, and it is unclear if anyone else was injured. The FAA is leading the investigation into the cause of the crash, the New York Post has reported. The incident follows a helicopter crash in Huntington Beach, California, a day earlier, which injured 5 people, including the pilot, stuntman Eric Nixon. Brian Frederick Jennings, convicted of raping and murdering 6-year-old Rebecca Kunash in 1979, is scheduled for execution by lethal injection in Florida on November 13th. Governor Ron DeSantis signed the death warrant, continuing a record pace of executions in 2025, with Jennings becoming the 16th person set for execution this year. Jennings was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery, and sentenced to death in 1986 after 2 prior convictions were overturned. Attorneys for Jennings are expected to appeal to the Florida Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court, the Associated Press has reported. Florida has led the nation in executions this year, surpassing the previous single-year record of 8 set in 2014. Lawyers for Luigi Maggione asked a New York federal judge to dismiss some criminal charges, including the only count carrying the death penalty, in connection with the December assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. They argued that prosecutors should be barred from using Maggione's statements to law enforcement and evidence from his backpack, which contained a gun and ammunition. Maggione, 27 years old, was arrested after Thompson was fatally shot as he arrived at a Manhattan hotel for an investor conference. His attorneys claim he was not read his rights before questioning, and that the backpack search lacked a warrant, NBC News has reported. Maggione has pleaded not guilty to both state and federal charges, and authorities had pursued him across multiple states following the shooting. On October the 12th, Buckeye, Arizona fire crews conducted multiple water rescues following heavy weekend rainfall, saving 4 people in 2 separate incidents. In one rescue, an adult stranded about 100 feet from fast-moving water near Old US 80 and Patterson Road was airlifted to safety with help from a sheriff's helicopter. Shortly after, 3 people trapped in a vehicle near Tuth Hill and Clara Vista were rescued using a ladder truck. No injuries were reported in either incident, Fox 10 Phoenix has reported. Officials emphasized the dangers of floodwaters, warning that just 12 inches of swift-moving water can carry a vehicle and urging the public to, quote, turn around, don't drown. Justin Cody Rackley has been sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without parole, plus 30 additional years, for a June 2024 house party shooting in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A jury found him guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. The shooting killed Daniel Carl Clements, Kelly Elizabeth Reeves, and Michael Andrew Thompson, and left 2 others injured. Rackley had pleaded not guilty to the charges, the Associated Press has reported. Jonathan Rinderknecht, 29, was arrested in Florida and charged with destruction of property by means of fire for allegedly sparking the deadly Palisades fire in Southern California on New Year's Day. Federal authorities said Rinderknecht, an Uber driver in Los Angeles that night, displayed agitation after dropping off a passenger near Pacific Palisades and allegedly started the fire at the Skull Rock trailhead. The blaze ultimately killed 12 people and displaced many others after underground embers reignited in strong winds. Prosecutors highlighted Rinderknecht's social media activity, which included anti-Trump posts, pro-Biden links, and frequent commentary on climate change, Fox News has reported. After starting the fire, he reportedly called 911 and asked ChatGPT if one could be at fault for a fire caused by cigarettes, to which the AI confirmed. A nor'easter swept up the U.S. East Coast on Sunday, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and coastal flooding from the Carolinas to New England, while western Alaska faced hurricane-force winds and catastrophic flooding from Typhoon Halong's remnants. In Alaska, entire homes were swept off foundations, and up to 20 people were initially reported missing, and then more than 170 sought shelter. Coastal flooding and road closures affected communities from North Carolina's Outer Banks to South Carolina, with homes damaged and motorists rescued from rising waters. New Jersey and parts of New York declared states of emergency, with coastal flooding warnings, high winds, heavy rain prompting sandbagging efforts and flight disruptions, and travel advisories, ABC News has reported. Officials emphasized safety, urging residents to stay home while emergency crews and utilities work to respond to damage and restore services. Okay, everybody, that is our show for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode of The News with B.C. Begley. And until then, hope you guys have a great rest of your day.